If you are watching this video, this means that you have finished step number 1, choosing a region and colony, that you've completed step number 2, completing the 13 colonies basic information sheet, and now you are ready to move on to step number 3, to select topics and questions to research more deeply based on the new information that you actually have from step number 2. Now in step number 2, you should be collecting basic information about your colony, but as you've done that, you need to go back and look, like, what information am I starting to see patterns around or information around? And today we're going to be using the colony of Delaware to kind of help you see how you move that information generally into specific research for your colony in step number 3. Now, if you're ready for step number 3, you're going to be looking at a little half sheet of information. On that half sheet of information, you're going to add your name, the period, the table, today's date, and the due date. Now, realize that the due date in this is before winter break, and you are working on collecting this information for your colony. So we're going to use the example colony of Delaware, which is part of the middle colonies. Now, as I was doing research about Delaware, I started to think about, like, which of my questions do I want to research? And so I selected one of my questions, which was women's rights. It says, what was life like for women in the United States? So that's going to be my research question. But as I'm thinking about that research question, if I just ask the question, what was life like for women in the United States, that's not actually going to give me any information about Delaware as a colony. And so I might actually ask the question, what was life like for women in the colony of Delaware? Now, if I'm asking that question, I need to think about, how do I actually break my question down? What are the pieces or words that I actually need to search for in order to get an answer? So if I'm thinking about women, if I'm thinking about colony, if I'm thinking about Delaware, those are all key pieces and things that I need to include in my question. Now, the first thing I might do when I am researching is actually just put that question in. So what was life like for women in the colony of Delaware? So we're going to try that really quickly to see what that ends up getting me. So what was life like for women in the colony of Delaware? Ta-da! Look it, I've found some answers. But are these really answers? So as I start to scroll through, I'm noticing that there is information about Delaware, but there's also just information about the colonies in general. And as I'm looking at that information, I also notice, like, there's some Weebly's, there's some people's, like, sites that they've created. You might recognize Land of the Brave, everyone's favorite website. You'll find some reference pieces. So these are some things that might get me started. But as I look really specifically, I don't know that I'm seeing a lot for women. Let's just take a look right here. Delaware, the colony of dreams. Here are jobs: men, women, girls, and boys. For women, we literally have one sentence. The women do housework and cook. Now, if I was going to try and return that question in, I don't know that that's a really great descriptor or answer for my research question that I'm attempting to find more detailed information on. And so if I'm thinking about Jamestown, I realize that women are not just like one monolithic group. There's actually different things here. There are different groups of people living in the colony of Delaware, just like there are probably different groups of people living in Jamestown. So if I think about the groups, there might be wealthy women, there might be middle-class women, poor women, enslaved women, people of European descent, women of African descent, and Native women. Those are going to get me more specific answers about Delaware. And so if I think about specific groups within the colony, I'm going to go back to my search, and I'm going to do a new one. I'm going to use Bing for this one, just because if Google's not working, Bing is always a good second option. So I'm going to search what were the different groups living in colonial Delaware. So here I have colonial history of the United States, the colonies, Delaware, differences among colonial regions, colonial Delaware. And so if I start to look at these pieces, let's take a look at this one. This is a website that you might recognize. Now, on this website, there are lots of reading and information, and as I scroll through, like, I start to see that there were the Dutch and the Swedish and the English, so we've got a wide diversity of individuals who are coming from Europe. And then as we look down, we see that the people of Delaware wanted independence from the strong influence of Pennsylvania's large population of Quakers. They were unwilling to become part of Lord Baltimore in Maryland, And we see, like, then it goes straight into the Revolutionary War. So again, this does not give me a lot of details about Delaware. So I could try and find information using Control F. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I could go Control F and try and find people, which shows me again like the people of Delaware. But remember, I'm looking for women, so maybe I'll try women. Oh no, there's no information about women in this article, so this is not actually very helpful to me. So let's go back and take a look at this one. Oh, that one's not working, so let's try something different. So if I go back to my questions, I've got these specific groups for women who are wealthy, middle class, poor, enslaved, European, African, and Native. Maybe I need to find out, like, was there slavery in Delaware? So I'm going to head back to the internet and I'm going to find out. I'm going to try Google. We'll see if it works. I'm going to try, did Delaware have slaves? Let's try that one. Now, I'm noticing still a few Indian slaves persisted until the 1720s and the presence of the clause. Okay, so this is telling some things about slavery in Delaware. This is awful. Late, and we go into the 1800s. So I guess maybe I need to change to not just did Delaware have slaves, but did Delaware colony have slaves? So now I've got some different answers, but it still is not giving me too much information. Let's take a look at this one in slavery in the 13 colonies. So slavery, and then I'm looking for Delaware. So let's see what Delaware comes up with. Delaware didn't have a lot of slaves, but then the Dutch person decides to train it. Man, this sure looks like someone wrote this as like a report or something. This doesn't seem to have a lot of background support information, but it does acknowledge that Delaware had slavery. But if I really think about my question is not just about slavery, but it's about women. So if I'm trying to find information about women in Delaware and in slavery, asking the question, did Delaware colony have slaves, might not actually help. But if I just try and search, did Delaware colony have enslaved women? Like, if I'm only getting these answers now, I might be getting too specific. So I might need to go about this a different way. My knowledge about Delaware is that Delaware is part of the middle colonies. So I might actually go back to my original question of what was life like for women in the colonies of Delaware and change it to the middle colonies. So instead of just searching about Delaware specifically, I might have to search about Delaware as part of the middle colonies. So what you're noticing is that I'm moving into step number 2, which is the search process. I'm doing several minutes of online searching to see if I can actually find answers, but I'm also having to make some decisions and choices to refine my search or to broaden my search. And in trying both of those things, that's going to give me more information as I try and find out about my colony. So instead, I'm going to ask about what was life like for women in the middle colonies. And as I do this, when I'm looking for life in the middle colonies, right here, my first answer, it says many families in the middle colonies were farmers. Men, women, and children all worked long hours in the field and in the home. So now I've not only discovered something about women, but I've also found out about life in the middle colonies. So if farming is a key part of the colony life and women are helping participate in that work, that gives me some information that might actually guide me as I'm starting to move into my deeper research. So some keywords that I might want to include or some things that I might want to add are that I have middle colonies, I have farming, and one of the things that I noticed is that there is slavery as a possibility. Maybe there's something that predates slavery. If I think back to Jamestown, indentured servitude might be a question that I have, like, is that what they used? I also noticed that there was something around, like, they attempted to use the natives, again, like Jamestown colonists. So maybe I need to look at, like, the natives or, like, the tribes of people living in the area around Delaware. Additionally, if I'm looking at all of these things, I noticed that the women, it was mentioned that they were working with their husbands and children. And so thinking about, like, why would these groups of people be working together? And that might take me to some information about, like, the social classes. If people are farming and as families, like, does that tell me something about the social structure of the Delaware colony as well? And so these are all things now that I have that I can begin to research more deeply. Now, if, as I'm doing all of this work, and you guys saw as I was researching here online, that sometimes I kind of came to this dead end, or I came to a place where I was like, I don't know that this is really answering my questions. This is where you then need to make some choices for yourself in your step 3. So step 3, as you've started to research your question and spent several minutes online researching, you need to evaluate, like, did you get to a dead end? And you need to say, like, I need to let go of this question and move on and move to something different. Do you need to select a new question entirely because the question that you've selected maybe doesn't apply to this historical time period, or puts you in a position where it's very specific or very minimal information that's available to you? Or do you need to change the question and edit it? So maybe I need to think about my question that I originally selected, which is, what was life like for women in the United States? And I made that specific to Delaware Colony. Maybe I need to even edit that more entirely and think about, like, what was life like for women in the middle class in the middle colonies? Like, that question might actually be answerable. So there's a lot of different choices that you have to make as a researcher for these questions. And as you're doing this, if you've come to a point where, like, you feel like you've actually started to edit down and select questions and topics that you feel like can actually be researched with information, you might actually be ready to start moving into step number 4. With step number 4, make sure that you get step number 3 signed off by myself or Mr. Berger so that you are ready to move into step number 4 and actually begin answering questions with information. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck today. I know you can do it.